Hello and welcome, I'm Kate Scrivener, and today I'm going to be doing a weekly wrap-up. I haven't done one of these in a little while, but I read a lot of books and I wanted to talk about them because we're going into the Christmas season and you know it's going to be all of these crazy things, and then I'm going to go back and be like, yes, at the first week of December, what did I read? Oh yeah. So to keep myself from doing that, I'm actually going to talk about the books that I read right now. So A Christmas Carol is a book that I had read back in March of 2018, and this was a season in my life when I was very eager to feel caught up on books. I feel like this is probably something that a lot of people have felt. Like, I feel like, you know, we always want to imagine ourselves more accomplished or like having more of an understanding of literature than we do. And then we like enter something like BookTube or like English class or something and you're like, oh, there's so many books I have not read. And in 2017 when I joined BookTube, I was like, yeah, there are so many books that I have never read. I like started that year with the imagination that I could read a bunch of classic books in a year and like feel pretty good. And then that year happened and I was like, no. I read A Christmas Carol out of season and I was like, it's fine. And then I reread it this year and I had a much better appreciation for it. I really enjoyed it, and I was in the third one when I went back and went, oh yeah, Katie from Books and Things has like a save review, which is like the chapters. I don't know why they're called that, but each chapter is called a save and she has 5 reviews for each of them and she goes in depth and it's just so fun. And I remember I was going to join this as a reread like 2 years ago and then I never did. So then I went back and watched the other 2 and then read each chapter and then like listened to her video. I love when I'm like reading books with other people and having like deep discussions about them and just fun discussions and the narrative voice and all of those things. And it is very funny and like also quite beautiful at the same time. Charles Dickens is an author I've had a testy relationship with. This was my first one, and then I read A Tale of Two Cities, and both of them I was just not very impressed with. Then I read David Copperfield and liked it a lot better. I quite liked it. I thought it was very long, but I enjoyed it. And then I read Oliver Twist this year and quite loved it as well. So yeah, I really have got an upward swing of my enjoyment of Charles Dickens, and yeah, I'm really excited to read more Charles Dickens in 2024 now. The second book I picked up was a recommendation from Greg from Supposedly Fun, and I was just so happy that I picked it up. It's called The Talk by Darrin. It is a graphic novel about this man growing up in the 1980s and his conversations about race and his experiences of racism, and then looking back to now and having conversations with his son. So he is a biracial man who had a white mother and a black father, and when we kind of get introduced to him, his parents have just separated and his mom is telling him that he should not play with a toy gun, and he just really doesn't understand why, and his father doesn't really want to have this conversation. And then we go throughout his life where he keeps on being told that like he shouldn't admit that racism is real and like all of these things, even though he experiences it, and every time that he tries to talk about it, it's shut down or not understood. And yet he also feels embarrassed because his mother gets so angry and he just wants to like seep into the like corners. And as he gets older, he starts to realize that he needs to talk about it more. There's this really poignant scene near the end of the novel when his 6-year-old son asks who George Floyd is. You see this when he doesn't want to answer because his son is so young and he doesn't want to open up this can of worms kind of thing. And then you see him go back into his childhood. Because it's a graphic novel, we see that picture of him on the couch with his father and like him asking questions and his father not answering, and then you have him understand that he doesn't want to answer his son because he doesn't want to tell him about the racism that he will experience. And throughout his life, he's always told his children that he writes books to make the world better. He has to understand that the world might not be better for his children, that they might not be solved, but that he can give them the tools to understand that. And I think it's just really powerful. I love graphic memoirs. I love graphic novels in general, but I think that especially as a place of memoir, that it's so impactful and wonderful. And I have like super enjoyed all of the graphic memoirs that I read. The third book that I read was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I was listening to this on audio throughout the other books as well. And The Last Tale is interesting. This is my 4th or 5th Roshni Chokshi, and I have enjoyed a lot of her work in the past, and I am sometimes a little bit disappointed in her work, and this one definitely fell into the thing where like I enjoyed so many elements of it, but I didn't love it. It was like a solid 3.5 stars. Like, it was middle of the road. I have fond memories about it, but I'm not going to be wowed by it. And I think that if it had been formatted differently, I could have loved it more, because it was really marketed as this like toxic marriage kind of Gothic story, and we start with the bridegroom, and I think the first 6 chapters are all bridegroom as he meets this woman named Indigo, and like, you know, they tell the stories of like folklores and stuff like that. But then we start having the narration of Azura, one of her childhood best friends, And that story kind of takes over, and that story is so much better. And I really wish we hadn't known anything about where Indigo would end up. It's so hard to talk about this because I feel like I can't say anything without kind of giving away some of the spoilers at the end, but it definitely did some of the things that I wanted it to do, but it didn't fully commit. There's things at the end that I would have changed, but like the original story of just the childhood growing up is Gothic and wonderful, and I love that it really asks you what is magic and what isn't. There's this aspect that the house kind of leans and changes and it feels very alive, but then there's other times in which people are saying that there's magic, and then we see behind the things that it's not really magic. Like the person is manipulating other people by pretending that there's magic and then getting away with things in that, and just like gaslighting people in that. And it's such a wonderful story, and I think that if it was a coming of age story that just had the end of the book at the beginning, although I don't think the bridegroom needed to exist at all. Like that is a character we did not need. We just need a story of these two women and like them going from childhood, and like it has some pretty heavy themes in it. So I would really, really look it up. But like there's moments in this book that will stay with me forever, that will haunt me. So back in May, I read The Swimmers by Julia Suka, and I became obsessed. Pretty much immediately after that, I read When the Emperor Was Divine, which was her debut book back in 2003. And then I read just recently The Boot in the Attic, which is a 2012 book. And I really liked this. She really has the chorus narration kind of down, which is telling the point of view. So this is about a bunch of mail order Japanese brides and when they show up in America and their lives and stuff like that. And we really tell the different narration and we go on their various different things. Brown Girls by Daphne Palazzi did this as well, and I really loved it there as well. Like I love this idea that we're seeing the collective narration of these things, and like we see both in negative and positive. Some people had positive experiences, some had bad, and I really liked it. And like I can see in which ways she got stronger every time. Like The Emperor and the Divine was a great book, but it was not like my favorite, and then this book was really good and like a step above, and then The Swimmers is like definitely in competition for one of my favorite books of the year. I really, really loved it. So I love the ways in which you can see her progressing as an author, and I'm so sad that it looks like she only comes out with a book every 10 years because I don't really want to wait till like 2032 to like get another book. That sounds really sad. I would really recommend any of Julia Suka's novels, and I know that they're like really little, like they're all like 150, like 200 pages. You can get through them really quickly, and yet they are really impactful. It's also one of the interesting things is that each of them touch on Japanese internment in the United States. So When the Emperor's Divine was like very much focused on that tale, and we have the different narration through, you know, the different family members who experienced it. And it is less chorus. It is chorus in many ways, but it's not quite chorus narration. And this one is looking at a bunch of mail order brides in the early 1900s, but it is having their experience of when they're mothers and like when their children are soldiers and stuff like that, and how, you know, they came to America to build this life and they were often disappointed in that. And then, you know, you kind of have this haunting story of them going through. And then I don't really feel like you can spoil these books, but skip 10 seconds if you really don't want to be spoiled at all. And like you have this like haunting narration when all of the Japanese people are gone because they've all been interned, and we're having the last chorus narration from white people looking around and like choosing to forget about the Japanese neighbors and people that they knew in their lives. And it is a haunting like last ending. And then The Swimmers is a book that is primarily focused on a woman with dementia and her daughter and like other people looking at her. And it is so beautiful. We do look back at Alice's childhood in which she was a woman who was internment, and I believe that Julia Suka's family, like her mother, experienced that and her grandparents experienced that. And like I think that it's an interesting thing that every single one of her books touches on it, because it is this legacy and this impact on every Japanese American family that was living in the US in the 1940s or before. I find it really interesting to look at the various places in which she has tackled being Japanese American throughout her literary career of over 20 years. If we're going to talk about another author that I really love, this is Jacqueline Woodson, If I Come Softly. This is one of her first books. She started in 1990 as an author, and this book came out in 1998. And it is like a classic book about interracial love. It was originally like a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but I would say that the forbidden part is the primary part about Romeo and Juliet. Like we don't really have like, the families don't know each other. They're not like rivals and stuff like that. But we have these two students that are transfers to the prep school, and they meet and they fall in love, and then we experience the experiences of them receiving racism. We definitely see this in Ellie, the female point of view, in which she is not expecting her family to be racist, and she's expecting her family to be, you know, all happy for her. And the fact when she says that she likes a black boy and they're all having all of these reactions, and she never assumed that that would happen. I think my love for Jacqueline Woodson actually hampered this book because of the fact that it's my 8th book by her. I believe that 2 of those are picture books, but I think that this is my 6th novel by her. And 3 of her books are like 5 stars that I absolutely like love. Brown Girl Dreaming, Harbor Me, and Before the Ever After. Like those are books that are like deep in my soul that I really, really love. So it is hard when you go back and you go back to 1998 when she's a much younger, much less experienced novelist. When some of the books that I've loved, like Brown Girl Dreaming, I think it's like a 2012, 2013 book, like Harbor Me is 2018, Before the Ever After, I read it when it first came out in 2020 or 2021, somewhere in there. So like these are, you know, decades more of experience, and she just doesn't have the experience here. I can see the ways in which her writing style and her lyricalness and her way of like weaving time and stuff has become mastered in later books that falls short here. And I know that this is a classic and I know that it's like well loved, but I only gave it 3 stars because I could definitely see the like the clunky writing in it, and it has a huge case of like insta love. Like these characters see each other on the first day of class, and when she drops her books and she knows his name, he doesn't even know her name, and then he doesn't transfer her to class for 6 weeks, but we have 6 weeks of them pining after each other, and it feels like it's like half the book like of them not even like knowing each other. And like she has conversations like with her family about like whether she would like date a black boy and stuff like that, you know, in the conversations before she's like even met him. And like not that that can't be a conversation, it just felt like it would have been more effective if we had spent them like actually meeting and starting to be interested in dating earlier on in the novel, like a week or something, because it feels like we really kind of skipped through the relationship. And I know that as she becomes a more mature author, that Woodson is so good at carrying time and space and like dragging us along, and I just felt like the time part was not conveyed well. Like we really do jump here because we have like them have their first kiss, and then we see like these images of like, you know, their arms around each other and like people looking at them and them kissing and people looking at them. But like, it's never like, then they became a couple. It's just like, it doesn't quite smoothly go into this. And then like we have scenes where they're much more seriously committed and stuff like that. But we like, it doesn't feel like we fully established that. And I think because we spent so much time with them like yearning after each other. Anyways, it's one of those things where like I see it and I acknowledge it, but I'm like not quite good. I will say one of the fun things about this book is the fact that it is from a free little diverse library, and I got it I think like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. I have been bad at like, I was so excited and then I haven't read it for a long time. So I do need to go return this now to a diverse library so someone else can read it. So yes, I'm really happy to have read this, one of her early books as well. And as a person who is an aspiring writer myself, sometimes seeing someone who I love and adore so much in her like 50s and 60s and author, seeing her in her 30s, I think still stumbling a little bit, like gives me encouragement that when I critique my own writing, when I critique things like that like, you know, we all mature as writers. And I'm not comparing myself to Jacqueline Woodson, like she is a master even here. And then we all know that I'm like a classic lover deep in my soul. Like, you know, I read a bunch of contemporary novels and then I was like, you know what, I really just need to read a classic. So I read The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. This is a very slim novel and it came out in 1918, which is super interesting because like the war was still going on. World War I had not come to peace, and she wrote this set in 1916 and published in 1918, still when World War I was going on. And yet it deals with shell shock, which is quite interesting because that was coined in May of 1915. Like, so super close turnaround of like when people were noticing that these soldiers were being wounded but not in a physical way is to being depicted in fiction. I love World War I and the time around it and what it represents in history and like how so much change and things can be seen around that. And for that reason, I found this book really interesting. Because of the fact that it says The Return of the Soldier, you would imagine that it is a book focused on a man's point of view, but it is really focused on these 3 women. And it is the fact that he has a wife who likes everything to be beautiful and pretty and like wonderful, and then we have his female cousin who lives with his family and seems to love and respect him a lot, and then we have this woman who comes into their living room and tells them that he is sick and that he's ill, and they're like, no, you're a fraudster, you're low class, and they have all of these really terrible classist things to say about her because they think that she's getting money from them. And then what we actually learn pretty quickly is the fact that she was his girlfriend 15 years ago, back in 1901. And we don't know exactly what broke them up, but he can't remember the last 15 years and he thinks that he's still in a relationship with Margaret. and Katie and Jenny have a lot of feelings about her because how could he love this woman who is not what they imagine? And the way that it's depicting shell shock is not exactly how we would understand PTSD today, and yet we kind of see it becoming a symbol. It's becoming a symbol of the nation of, you know, the UK looking back, because this is when war is still going on, and they're saying, I wish we could go back 15 years ago when everything felt more simple and innocent and we didn't have machine guns and we didn't have all of these things. And, you know, PTSD causes memory lapse and causes issues of traumatic moments, but not of like entire things. Like he wouldn't forget that he had a wife because of PTSD, but like that is how it is represented here. So like the science is not great, but the metaphor is there. And this book that I found really interesting, it definitely deals with class and gender in really interesting ways. And I don't know exactly where I felt. I felt like I ended up rating it about a 3.5, but it's a book that I want to think about a lot. I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in this time period or in this subject, or war fiction, or like women's role in that and like a home front thing, but I would not say that it's like an extraordinary novel. So the last book that I finished in this time period was Jane and Prudence by Barbara Pym. And I have wanted to read Barbara Pym for quite a while. She has a book named Excellent Women that is often compared to Jane Austen in her witticism and comedicness, but also, you know, social critique. And this is definitely a book that was not well received at the time, and I definitely think it probably wasn't a great place to start with it, especially since I did not like the narration at all. Because I think some of the things that were supposed to be like funny or something like that, she just did not announce. Like it was very like whimsical, and her just like speaking very grandly and slowly, and that did not feel like that should have been the narration for this book. And that bothered me, but I didn't have access to it in another way, and I did really want to read it. But this is about Jane and Prudence, and they were both students at Oxford at different times, and later on Jane was a tutor of Prudence, and currently they are aged 29 and 41. And the 41-year-old is Jane, and she's a vicar's wife in a small village, and Prudence is 29 and she lives in the city, and she works in an office job, and she has love affairs, mostly just like unrequited crushes on people, but she's also admired greatly. And we follow their different stories of interacting with people. I haven't read Excellent Women, her most like well-beloved novel, but I would not say that I would read this book and actually compare it to Jane Austen, because I think Jane Austen is much more clever in many ways of this, and this book definitely had its clever moments, but also had a lot of lack there. And Barbara Pym as an author also critiqued this work, so it probably wasn't the book that like I should have gone for. I'm definitely interested in reading more Barbara Pym because of what I've heard about her work in general, but if I was just going to, you know, pick up or not pick up a book based on this book alone, I probably would not have sought out more of her books in the future. And yeah, it wasn't that it was a bad book, it was a book that didn't like leave a lasting impression on me. Like there was moments I laughed and I liked the ending, but I feel like in like 2 years time, if you ask me what this book is about, I'm going to just remember like a hazy vibe with nothing else. Hopefully in a short thing at the end, I want to talk about the books that I'm currently reading, as well as what I'm going to read in the next week. So I have been continuing on with The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood, and it is taking a turn to the negative. I talked about in my TBR how I got to a point and I was shocked by it, but after that point, I'm not liking it as much. It's a different kind of narration and it is not as compelling to me. And also there's been a few moments of like casual racism, which is by characters that we're not really supposed to respect. How we don't send surveys to like indigenous people because they're barbarians and like all of this like really racist crap. And I was like, okay, Margaret, not what I want to see in my life. So I have a little over half left. And I must admit, I kind of want to DNF it. I don't want to DNF it because like I really loved the first half and was like, I am so much on a Margaret Atwood kick. And then the second half is hit and I'm like, okay, that, like, I could have ended it at the halfway point and been happy with this novel. I'm really hoping I'm going to finish this book because I want to read it, and I've been reading it out throughout the fall, and I started loving it so much, and then like loved, you know, and read like 100 pages, and as a slow reader, that is a lot. A book that has been going much more positively is Look How Far You Have Gone, and this is just encouragement poetry. She just draws really, really beautifully, and I really enjoy reading it, and yeah, I find it a very big encouragement through hard times in my life. And then on audiobook, I'm currently reading You Are Naked, You Are Eating an Orange. And I was really hoping I was gonna like this. This is a Canadian author that published it 2 years ago in 2021. And it was definitely like a cilantro book. Some people loved it, some people hated it. It's a short book. I am just over 50% done and I am not liking it very much. Like, I don't hate it. if it was a longer book, I would have DNF'd it. I thought about DNFing it, and then I thought there's so little left. Like, I should just persevere so I can count it and like talk about it as like a full novel. So what do I want to read into the next week? I really want to read Garlic and the Vampire. This is a short graphic novel that I'm really excited to read, and hopefully will be really just fun and encouraging. And it's about a garlic who wants to be brave, etc. I am really feeling Can You Forgive Her? I might just stop reading You Are Naked, but I also want to just finish it. But I also just feel the need to read Anthony Trollope, and I definitely feel in the mood to want that. And I am going to visit my family, which lives like 5 hours away, and I'm going to have a very long audiobook driving experience. So I'm really excited to kick that out. I really love short story collections. As I'm visiting one family member and I'm driving like 15-20 minutes, I can put a short story on, listen to it, and then, you know, by the time that I get there, I have like completed that thought, and then I can go in, socialize, and on the way home I listen to another one. It's very fun. So I'm going to be listening to Night on the Living Rez, and this is a book that I've been really excited about reading for like over a year, and thank you so much for joining me and for coming along in this very long weekly reading. I would love to know what you have read this week and what you are looking to squeeze in before the end of the year. I would love to hear it, and I will talk to you next time.